5 years ago, I did something I dreamed of for a long time. I bought a quiet, untouched piece of land just outside of town. It wasn't much to look at back then, just trees, wild brush, and a narrow dirt road leading into nothing. But to me, it was perfect. It was peace. A place where I could someday build my own off-grid cabin. Somewhere I could breathe. Life, of course, had other plans. Work got busy. My dad fell ill. Then came the pandemic. The land sat untouched for years. I paid the taxes, kept the deed tucked safely in a folder, and told myself, soon. I'll go back soon. And then, 5 years later, I did. I packed up a few tools, printed the original survey maps, and made the drive. I had plans. Big ones. I was finally ready to break ground. Maybe even spend the summer out there camping, clearing the land, sketching out cabin blueprints by the firelight. I was excited, hopeful even. But as I got closer, something didn't feel right. The little dirt road that led to my land looked different. It was wider now. Gravel had been poured on top of the old mud ruts. A mailbox I didn't recognize sat at the edge of the road. It had numbers on it, not mine. I pulled up slowly, heart racing a little, and then I saw it. A house. Not a shack, not a shed. A full-blown, modern, two-story suburban house, white siding, two-car garage, a porch swing, built right in the middle of my land. I froze in my truck. For a second, I thought maybe I'd made a wrong turn. Maybe I was lost, but the GPS was screaming otherwise. I pulled out the paper map, unfolded it across the steering wheel, and compared it again with the pins I had dropped years ago. This was my land, and that house was sitting dead center on it. I got out slowly, boots crunching against gravel that hadn't been there the last time I came. Everything was too clean. The lawn was manicured. There was a flag hanging by the front door. There were even wind chimes, softly playing in the breeze. It looked like the house had been here for years. I walked to the edge of what used to be a clearing and pulled out my phone to take some photos. My fingers were shaking. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could someone build a house on someone else's land without anyone noticing? Without permits? Without something? That's when the front door opened. Out stepped a woman, mid-50s, blonde bob haircut, sunglasses on her head, clipboard in hand. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she looked annoyed. Before I could even say a word, she raised a hand and called out, "Excuse me, can I help you? This is private HOA property." I blinked. I thought maybe I misheard. This is my land," I said cautiously. "I bought it 5 years ago." She laughed. Actually laughed. "That's not possible," she said, stepping off the porch. "This house has been here for years. If you're lost, you'll need to check with the HOA office. You can't just show up here like this." I pulled the deed from my bag and held it up. "I'm not lost." "You're on my property." Her smile slowly vanished. She glanced at the papers. Her eyes narrowed. "Well," she said after a long pause, "if that's the case, then we'll need to talk about you joining our HOA. We've been maintaining this area for years. You can't just opt out." That's when it hit me. She knew. She'd known all along. And now she wanted me to join her HOA for the land she had stolen. Big mistake. I didn't know what I expected when I got out of my truck, but it definitely wasn't this. A stranger living in a house planted right in the middle of my land, talking to me like I was the intruder. Still trying to process what I was seeing, I slowly walked toward the house. I was hoping maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding, a paperwork glitch, anything but what my gut was telling me. That's when the front door swung open, and out she came. Mid-50s, blonde hair and a perfect helmet of a bob, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, and in her hand, a clipboard, because of course she had a clipboard. She looked at me like she'd been expecting me, like I was the problem she'd been dreading all morning. Before I could even get out a single question, she raised one finger and snapped, "Excuse me. You can't be here without HOA approval. This is a private community." For a second, I was too stunned to respond. Was she joking? HOA approval? On my land? I blinked, trying to make sense of what I just heard. I think there's been a mistake, I said slowly. This is my property. I bought this land 5 years ago. She gave me a tight, fake smile. Sweetheart, I don't know what you think you bought, but this entire neighborhood has been under Whispering Pines HOA since the development went up. If you're looking for someone, you should check with the office. But until then, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Her tone wasn't just condescending, it was authoritative. She really believed she was in charge here. I reached into my bag and pulled out the deed, printed maps, and the original land survey. Ma'am, I said as politely as I could manage, this land doesn't fall under any HOA. It's privately zoned. It's never been part of any development. She didn't even glance at the papers. Instead, she crossed her arms and tilted her head. That's not what our records say, she said. You must be confused. Maybe you bought land near here, but this house has been part of the HOA for years. I could feel the frustration bubbling up, but I held it down. I'm not confused, I said firmly. This house is sitting on my land. You're trespassing. That's when her smile dropped completely. For a second, her eyes darted toward the edge of the property, where my surveyor's markers would have been. I saw a flicker of something. Recognition. She knew. She absolutely knew. But instead of backing down, she took a step closer and said, Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but if you're trying to scare me, it's not going to work. We have rules here. If you want to be part of this community, you'll have to go through the HOA like everyone else. That means approval, fees, and a background check. It was like I'd stepped into some kind of suburban twilight zone. Not only was this woman illegally living on my land, but now she was demanding I follow her rules? I stared at her for a long second. I'm not asking to join your HOA, I said. I'm telling you that your house is built on land that belongs to me. She paused. Then she gave me that smug smile again. Well, she said coldly, if you want peace, I suggest you start playing by our rules. Otherwise, we'll make it very unpleasant for you around here. She turned around, walked back into the house, and shut the door. I stood there, stunned. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be easy. I wasn't just dealing with an illegal house. I was dealing with a Karen in power, and she thought the HOA made her untouchable. She had no idea who she was messing with. Karen didn't back down. Not for a second. After our tense exchange on the porch, she insisted I follow her to the front of the property. She walked with stiff determination, like she was leading a school tour, clip-clopping down the gravel driveway in wedge sandals. Then she stopped in front of a tall, wooden sign carved in cursive that read, Welcome to Whispering Pines, a gated HOA community. She gestured toward it like it was the final word in the conversation. There, she said proudly. That's your answer. You're standing in an HOA zone. I'm the president. And frankly, showing up like this without notice is already a violation of our community standards. I looked at the sign. I looked at her. Then I looked around. There was no gate. No actual fencing. Nothing about this place looked private. Just a few homes scattered along the country road, and this fancy wooden sign that probably cost more than some people's cars. I'm not part of your HOA, I replied calmly. My land was sold independently years before any of this went up. I've got the zoning documents, the parcel number, and the county survey right here. I unfolded a folder from my bag and handed her the papers. She didn't even pretend to read them. Instead, she gave me a sideways glance and scoffed. Well, those documents don't really matter. Our HOA was formed before most of these properties were sold. That includes yours. You may not realize it yet, but this land has technically been under our coverage for 5 years. You've just been inactive. Technically. I couldn't believe the nerve. Let me be clear, I said, pointing to the highlighted section on the official county zoning map. This boundary line, it cuts right here. Your property ends there. My land, this land, is outside your HOA. I confirmed it with the county twice. That was when I saw it. Just a flicker, but it was there. Karen's confident smirk wavered. Her eyes darted down to the line I was pointing at, then back up to me. For the first time, she hesitated, and that's when I went in for the kill. I flipped to the next page photos from a recent drone flyover. Clear as day, her house extended feet past her official lot line. Her porch? On my land. Her back fence? Deep into it. Even her flower beds were planted on soil that legally belonged to me. You built over the line, I said bluntly. That's trespassing, whether you knew it or not. Karen's face flushed. She reached for the papers again, this time slower, like maybe now she'd actually read them. But halfway through skimming the top, she shoved them back into my hands. You can't just barge in here with threats, she snapped. We have legal protections. Whispering Pines is a recognized HOA. If you want to live in peace around here, you're going to have to follow the rules. Pay the fees. Attend the meetings, or we'll make your life very difficult. She was doubling down, even as her fake authority began to crack. So let me get this straight, I said, holding back a laugh. You want me to pay dues to an HOA I'm not part of, because your house is illegally sitting on my land? She didn't answer. Instead, she crossed her arms and stared at me like she had some secret weapon in her back pocket. Like the power of the HOA would magically make this problem disappear. I realized then Karen wasn't just clueless. She was dangerous in her confidence. She built a false kingdom, and now she was terrified of anyone pulling the curtain back. But I wasn't going away. And this fake little empire of hers? It was about to crumble. I knew arguing with Karen on the spot wasn't going to get me anywhere. She was too confident, too wrapped up in her fantasy of being queen of some suburban empire. So instead of wasting breath, I nodded politely, got in my truck, and drove away, silent but determined. As soon as I got home, I grabbed a folder with all my documents and made one phone call to my real estate attorney, Mark Leyland, a sharp, no-nonsense kind of guy who specialized in land disputes. I told him everything. The house, the ocho, the trespassing, even the nerve Karen had to demand I join the very group that illegally built on my land. He didn't laugh. He didn't even sound surprised. Happens more often than you think, he said. Let's go pay her a visit. 1 week later, we returned, this time with backup. Mark showed up in a gray SUV, stepping out in polished boots and mirrored sunglasses like he was ready to star in a courtroom drama. With him was a licensed surveyor named Carlos, who brought equipment that looked like it belonged on a NASA mission. Tripods, laser rangefinders, GPS beacons, the whole deal. We got to work right away. Carlos began by establishing new boundary markers based on the latest GIS coordinates from the county registrar's office. He cross-verified everything with the original deed and tax plat. It wasn't even close. Karen's house was way over the line. We weren't talking inches. We were talking 30 feet of encroachment. That meant part of her garage, back porch, and half her garden were squarely on my lot. While Carlos worked, I flew a drone overhead to capture video footage. The contrast was clear. Her property line stopped, and the structure just kept going. That's when the front door slammed open. Out stormed Karen, red-faced and wild-eyed, her phone in one hand, that clipboard still clutched in the other like a security blanket. "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted, marching toward us. "You can't just come onto HOA land and start measuring things." Mark turned slowly, removed his sunglasses, and introduced himself in the calmest tone imaginable. "Ma'am, I'm a real estate attorney representing the legal owner of this parcel. We're conducting a professional survey to confirm the boundaries and document encroachment." Karen's jaw clenched. "I already told him, this is HOA jurisdiction. You people can't just show up and act like you own the place." Mark gave a faint smile. "According to multiple documents on file with the county, he does own the place. Your structure appears to be partially built on private property that doesn't belong to the HOA. She looked between me, the lawyer, and the surveyor. Her face was beginning to pale, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I don't care what your paperwork says. The HOA has rules, and we're protected. If you try to take this to court, we'll fight you. You'll regret this." That was her second big mistake, openly admitting she knew there was a conflict and then threatening retaliation. Mark didn't even blink. He simply nodded and said, "Noted." We wrapped up the site visit, taking dozens of photos and measurements. Carlos placed bright orange markers along the true boundary right through her backyard flower bed. The drone hovered silently above, documenting everything from every angle. Karen stood at the edge of her porch, arms crossed, seething. She thought the OE gave her some kind of immunity, that she could rewrite property lines and bully people into silence. But she was wrong, because now I wasn't just a quiet landowner with a dream. I had a lawyer, a surveyor, and proof. And Karen? She was standing on borrowed ground. You'd think after watching a lawyer and a professional surveyor mark her property line, Karen would have had the common sense to take a step back, maybe even apologize. But no, that's not how Karens operate. Instead of retreating, she escalated. 2 days after our land survey, I received a thick envelope in the mail. The return address said Whispering Pines HOA, complete with a fancy gold logo and a name printed in bold letters, Karen L. Whitmore, President. Inside was a 3-page formal demand letter, written like she was running some kind of Supreme Court. It was stamped, signed, and full of legal-sounding fluff. But when I actually read it, I couldn't believe what she was asking for. Karen was demanding that I pay 5 years of backdated HOA community fees, claiming my land had benefited from shared neighborhood amenities. Never mind that I hadn't stepped foot on the property in 5 years. She insisted that just owning land within proximity of HOA boundaries obligated me to pay for things like road maintenance, seasonal landscaping, and even a neighborhood security patrol I'd never seen. But that wasn't the most outrageous part. She also included a fine, yes, a fine for what she called unauthorized use and damage to HOA property. Apparently, the very act of conducting a survey and placing marker flags on my own land was, in her mind, a violation of HOA landscaping rules. And to top it all off, she threatened legal action if I didn't comply within 14 days. Failure to respond, she wrote, will result in legal escalation through HOA counsel and potential property liens. I almost laughed. Almost. But the more I thought about it, the more furious I became. She wasn't just bluffing. She was trying to intimidate me. This letter was a scare tactic, designed to make me doubt myself, panic, and back off. But I wasn't the one who should be panicking. So this time, I didn't respond with a phone call or another visit or even a letter. I responded with something stronger, court papers. Mark, my lawyer, drafted a cease and desist along with a formal complaint that we filed with the county court. The complaint laid out the facts: property encroachment, unpermitted construction, harassment, and fraudulent attempts to impose unauthorized HOA fees. We included every piece of documentation: the survey, photos, drone footage, zoning maps, and yes, even Karen's own letter, which was now Exhibit A in a legal case against her. Once the papers were officially filed, she was served in person. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard from a neighbor that when the process server showed up at her door, clipboard in hand, she turned white as a ghost. The same Karen who puffed out her chest and quoted HOA laws like scripture was now facing a very real lawsuit that could cost her tens of thousands of dollars. But even then, she didn't back down. She started printing flyers, handing out memos to her neighbors, spreading rumors that I was suing the HOA to scare people, that I was trying to bankrupt the community. The truth? I wasn't suing the HOA. I was suing her, because she built her house on my land, and no amount of letters, fines, or fake authority could change that. The difference now? The law was on my side 3 months later. It all came to a head, in court. I'll never forget the moment Karen strutted into the courtroom like she was walking into a board meeting, clipboard in hand, hair perfectly sprayed, wearing a blazer that practically screamed, "I'm in charge." She didn't even glance at me. To her, this wasn't a hearing. It was an opportunity to reclaim control. But that illusion shattered quickly. The judge, an older man with a calm but stern demeanor, took one look at Karen's confident posture and narrowed his eyes. You could tell he'd seen her type before. People who believed rules didn't apply to them. People who thought showing up with a binder of HOA policies somehow carried the weight of the law. Spoiler, it doesn't. My lawyer, Mark, stood up first. He was calm, professional, precise. He walked the court through the timeline, purchase date, original zoning classification, deed history. He then presented the current land survey, which clearly showed Karen's home extended nearly 30 feet onto my property. Then came the drone footage, zoomed out, time-stamped, crystal clear. It showed the house sitting directly across the legal property line. Everyone in that courtroom could see it, even Karen. Still, she didn't flinch. When it was her turn to speak, she rose with the confidence of someone who had been on 17 HOA committees and never lost a bake sale. She launched into a speech about community values, neighborhood cooperation, and how the HOA had always assumed that my parcel was part of their oversight. She waved her clipboard dramatically and declared, "This property has functionally been under HOA care for over 5 years. We sent notices. We maintained the road. We even trimmed brush along the edge. If anything, we should be compensated. Mrs. Whitmore, please present documentation proving that the plaintiff's land was legally annexed by your HOA. Karen blinked. Her hand froze midair. She looked down at her clipboard, flipped a page, then another and another. Nothing. She had no legal proof. No annexation paperwork. No signed documents. Not even a copy of the plat map showing boundary changes, because none of that existed. Then came the bombshell. Mark stood again, holding a stack of papers with the county seal. Your Honor, according to the county's building department, the defendant never applied for or received permits for the extension of her property that crosses onto my client's land. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Karen stammered. That's not true. I thought the developer took care of that years ago. But it didn't matter. Intent didn't override legality. No permits meant the construction was unauthorized. No annexation meant her HOA claims were irrelevant. And trespassing, even if accidental, meant she was liable for damages. Judge sat back, took a long look at both of us, and then said the words I've been waiting to hear. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. But the judge wasn't finished. He added that she was responsible for the encroachment and gave her 2 options. Remove the portion of her home that crossed into my property. Pay a financial settlement for land use and damages. Oh, and all legal fees were on her. Her face turned a deep shade of red. The clipboard slowly lowered. For once, she had nothing to say. The HOA queen had just been dethroned. The ruling was crystal clear. I won. After months of legal back and forth, hours of testimony, and Karen's endless theatrics, the court ruled decisively in my favor. Karen had built illegally. She had trespassed. She had harassed. And she had tried to cover it all up under the false banner of her precious HOA. The judge gave her 2 options, both painful. She could either demolish the portion of her house, garage, porch, landscaping, everything, that had crossed the legal boundary onto my land, or pay me $185,000 as a settlement for land use legal damages, and the year she essentially squatted without permission. And let's not forget, she was also ordered to cover all court fees and attorney costs. Karen looked stunned. Her confident facade had shattered like glass. The clipboard? Gone. The HOA arrogance? Crumbling. But being Karen, she didn't go quietly. She tried to appeal the ruling, insisting the judge had misunderstood the spirit of the HOA. She claimed she was only doing what was best for the community. But once the appeal reached the review board, things took a wild turn. See, by that point, the story had spread. A few neighbors had been watching everything unfold. One of them, a quiet man who lived 2 houses down, decided to speak up, and once he did, others followed. Turns out, Karen had been abusing her position as HOA president for years. She had fined people for using the wrong kind of mailbox, threatened to tow cars that were legally parked, issued violation notices for things as petty as leaving garden hoses in the yard, even tried to have someone evicted over a lawn gnome. Now, emboldened by my legal win, the neighbors finally came forward. One neighbor told the press, she made life miserable for all of us. It was never about community. It was about control. When a local newspaper caught wind of the story, they ran a headline that read, HOA president loses $185,000 land battle. Neighbors call for resignation. And just like that, the image Karen had spent years polishing as the guardian of neighborhood standards turned to dust. Within a week of the story breaking, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Under pressure from residents and facing potential lawsuits of their own, they voted unanimously to remove Karen as president. She didn't even show up to the meeting. In a rare move, the board issued a public apology, which was posted to the neighborhood's online portal and emailed to all homeowners. It read, "We sincerely regret the actions of our former president, Karen Whitmore. After reviewing legal documents and court records, we confirm that the land in question was never under Whispering Pines HOA jurisdiction. We apologize to the property owner and our community for the misrepresentation and overreach that occurred." And just like that, her reign ended. Her power gone. Her clipboard retired. Her fake rules and HOA tyranny finally exposed for what they were. I won the case, yes. But it was more than just money or land. It was justice. For me, for the neighbors, and for every person who's ever been bullied by someone hiding behind made-up authority. And Karen? She learned the hard way that titles mean nothing when the law speaks. In the end, Karen lost everything she tried so desperately to control. After the court ruling, the press coverage, and the unanimous vote to strip her of old leadership, Karen finally faced reality. She could either keep fighting a battle she was destined to lose, or take the only off-ramp left, pay the settlement, and walk away quietly. She chose the money. Within 45 days, Karen put the house on the market, quick sale, no contingencies. A new real estate agent, clearly trying to distance themselves from the drama, listed it as a unique property opportunity with minor zoning clarifications needed. Yeah, okay. She didn't say goodbye to the neighbors. No farewell barbecue. No moving day smiles. Just a few boxes, a couple of hired movers, and her trademark clipboard tucked under her arm as she drove away in silence. When the check cleared, I stood there with my lawyer, holding a settlement that validated every moment of stress, frustration, and sheer disbelief I had gone through. $185,000. It wasn't about the money, it was about justice. And what did I do? I built my dream cabin exactly where I had planned to 5 years ago, right on the land Karen thought she owned. I made sure it was modest, sturdy, and positioned perfectly to overlook the trees that had stood silently through all this chaos. Those trees had watched it all, from the first time I visited the land to the day I returned to claim it again. The porch? I placed it right where her illegal garden used to be. Now, every morning, I sit out there with a cup of coffee in hand, listening to the birds, watching the mist rise off the grass. No HOA rules, no trespassers, no one telling me what flag I can fly, what color mailbox I need, or when I can mow my lawn. Just peace, my land, my rules, and best of all, no Karen. It would have been easy to get angry, to yell, threaten, or stoop to her level, but I didn't. I let the truth do the talking. I followed the law. I built my case. I stood my ground, and in the end, that's what won. Karen thought that by wielding her made-up power, her fake titles, and her HOA forms, she could intimidate people into submission. But real power? That comes from knowing your rights, from doing your homework, from showing up with facts instead of fear. And the neighborhood? It's thriving now. Without Karen micromanaging every blade of grass, people actually talk to each other. One of the neighbors even brought me homemade pie when they heard I was finally building my cabin. "Thanks for standing up to her," he said. "We all wanted to, but we didn't know how." That hit me harder than I expected. Because sometimes standing your ground doesn't just protect you, it empowers others. So here's the moral of the story, plain and simple. Never let anyone bully you off your own land. Not with fake laws, not with HOA letterhead, not with threats. And if someone ever shows up with a clipboard, a fake smile, and a demand for HOA dues, check your property lines. Twice. You might just uncover the biggest mistake they've ever made.